this
Live streaming is on.
and where is this PPT? You can see this PPT and you can see the screen, right? And you can hear properly.
Yes, are visible and audible.
Okay. Om Bhuvasvaha Tatsavitu Bhargo Devasva Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodayat Om Bhuvasvaha Tatsavitu Bhargo Devasva Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodayat Om Bhuvasvaha तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ओम्. Okay, so we are continuing dry part of the function 2, dry cargoes, and today we will do some cargoes, dry cargoes. Mostly, if you see the book Errol Fernandez, many are given there. So we will just try that. So first cargo you can see here is sulfur. So we had discussed a little bit about sulfur and coal, their properties and flammable and all. You can let discuss these few cargoes, their main properties and related safety in the bulk carriers, and some more cargoes we will see, the general cargoes carried as bulk carriers. So let's start with sulfur. So sulfur properties we know it is flammable and then corrosive and toxic in nature, and it does not heats spontaneously on its own like coal. It needs a little higher temperature. Sulfur is present in fuel oil and many other things, and it is easily inflammable. It can, if there is a spark, it catches fire very easily. So it's a lot of fire hazard. Then fuses when heated slightly. So if there is a very slight fire, then because of the dust and all, it will subside fast. If it burns, then it gives out sulfur dioxide, which combines with salt to produce sulfuric acid, H2SO4, and that is very corrosive. So what are the hazard? Main hazard was, first is of course the fire, then corrosion, then dust explosion, and normal corrosion. So how we take precautions for this loading sulfur? So first you should have no, first hazard is fire hazard. To avoid that, we should have no loose metal objects is in the either hold or wherever on the deck also if possible. No like bilge covers and all should properly lashed, secured. All other lashing gear, cranes, everything should be lashed. And inside the hole there should be nothing left which can cause spark during rolling, pitching, vibrations. During discharging, the grab could strike against it and produce a spark. So the grabs have to be used very precautiously and slowly. Freshwater hoses to be rigged on deck. If fire occurs, a fire spray of fresh water may be used or more sulfur shoveled onto the burning area to smother it. Okay, so if there is a small fire on the heap of the sulfur, normally, like we told before, you can spray a little bit of fresh water. And if fire is large, close to the hatch or hatch entrance, then you can use CO2. So most of the bulk carriers you have CO2, fixed CO2 system, and the lines connected inside the holes. In case of fire, you can use that. If you remember, you were asking this question, there is fire, so you have fixed CO2, but we use it in the last. Okay.
Yes,
Then
sir.
Then we have sulfur dust that can readily ignite, causing an explosion. And sulfur is wetted with fresh water. So the dust also, as we discussed before, catches fire very fast. And for that, we sprinkle water to prevent dust rising during loading.
Captain sir, sir,
Yes,
if I can ask one doubt.
yes, yes.
Sir, this in case of smothering that we told in a heap of sulfur, if some fire happened, so our first action will be using more sulfur on the top and have a smothering effect, or we will start the fixed fire extinguisher.
That depends. See, here it is just talking about the dust. Okay. So most of the sulfur is stacked in the yards on the land near the jetties. Big, big lands with many, many heaps of sulfur. So generally, if there is some smothering, it keeps happening because of the heat or it's like that. Now, if you start going and moving the dust, sulfur dust, it would be very like you need either you will need a crane or portable cranes, and for every heap you will need, or it has to work continuously. Second option is that they have lines of fresh water all around, like you have per fixed lines for putting water to the plants. You just start the tap and it goes to all the heaps. So comparatively, this is a easier method where the laid down pipes are there and you can just on it and it on all the heaps or wherever it is connected, the water will sprinkle and the fire will or whatever fumes are rising, they will subside and then after some time stop it. But uh, and this water will be dried again in because it's exposed to the sun, so in some time it will be dried and there will be not significant harm to the cargo. But if you have a grab and it's a little bit small or whatever kind of smoke is coming, yes, you can obviously just take some more sulfur and put it. Depends if the grab and or small cherry picker crane is available. So that is not always available. Like in ship, you're too much rolling. How will you use and from where you will get extra sulfur? So there, these putting and spraying or boundary cooling, these are the only procedures. Okay.
Sir, and if we are loading in the hold and fire like fire hazard has happened, we cannot use the fresh water, na, sir. It will affect the moisture content and TML of the cargo, right, sir?
Yeah, you cannot put too much, but if the chance is the temperatures keep rising and the fire is rising, instead of damaging the full ship, that cargo may be damaged and you need to hose down to come down the fire. Even you can use CO2, which will also come change the cargo reaction and it will react and contaminate the cargo. But it will save the ship and life of the person, which is the most important. So it has to be judged very cautiously depending on the extent and of the fire and the impact, and also communicated with company receivership or whatever as per the time situation and awareness. So there is no like fixed answer. This has to be done depending on the scenario and the amount of fire in the scenario and how much urgency in what the company or communication takes place. We will, as per that, decide to hose down or start CO2 or whatever, or just sprinkle or do boundary cooling. Okay.
Okay, sir.
So while sweeping the hole, this hazard arises and hence the hole should be well ventilated. So when you're sweeping, sometimes you might use some sharp materials which can cause spark. So it has to be avoided and proper ventilation should be there. Now if it is loaded in sulfur is loaded in wet condition, then uh, to prevent dust being raised and to retard inflammability, The presence of water enhances the corrosive power of sulfur, and on discharge, it will be seen that the steel work in the hold, especially the tank top and rusted areas, have been badly corroded. To protect the hold, it should be liberally coated with lime, particularly areas where the paint coating is removed. So, if there is wet, it will mix and it will be make sulfuric acid, which is very corrosive, and also whatever gas remaining is there is flammable also. So to avoid that corrosion, we coat the ship side bulkheads with lime, that is calcium carbonate. Okay, so that is still the, because it's a very heavy cargo, so you cannot load it like 100% like grain and all. So approximately calculating the height, maybe you can say half height of the hold, and or less, till there we like put a coating on the bulkhead of lime, calcium carbonate, chuna. So that will avoid the contact of sulfur with the bulkhead or sulfuric acid wherever it's there, and prevent it from too much corrosion. Otherwise, to de-rust that, it will take many, many days. Of course, some amount of rust will be there, but the major amount will be, it will not rust so much. So the pairs, and then hole should be thoroughly cleaned and removed when you are cleaning. After that, it should be properly cleaned and removed all the material like rags, pieces of wood to be removed. No loose metal objects to be left in the hole. Bilges to be tested and covered with limber boards. Any chinks should be caulked to prevent dust from finding its way into the bilges. Okay. Holes to be lime washed prior washing, as we just discussed. COT system has to be tried out for emergency. And when you are discharging, holes should be thoroughly cleaned with particular attention to be paid on the underside of hatches, because it's a dusty cargo. So corners, underside, these are the areas which you forget, which should be cleaned properly. Box beams, ledges. And when the sulfur is loaded wet, the quantity may turn out to be less by weight, because the weight with the wet cargo, some cargo will go inside the bilges. So there will be some less cargo. Bills of lading should be suitably claused to prevent claims being made. So when there is a bill of lading, which is showing the contract, who is the owner of the cargo, who is the shipper, and all. So this in that there is all the rules as per which it's like a receipt agreement of the cargo between shipper and receiver. So the rules should be made clear, who will be responsible if the quantity is less or like that, due to genuine reasons like lime washing or wet sulfur or something. So let's see one case study is, there was one ship which was capsizing, MV Arcadia Pride in Mumbai anchorage. So it was in 1997, and ship was anchored in Mumbai harbor with cargo of granular sulfur from West Africa during the monsoon. So it was West Africa, and they were loading West sulfur for Africa, West Africa. Sorry, it was loaded from West Africa, and they were anchored in Mumbai harbor, maybe to discharge. On one particular day, the swell was very high and the cargo shifted, and she capsized with the loss of several lives, ship, and cargo. So this vessel loaded with sulfur might be having some wet sulfur already, and it is liable to shift if the ship moves. So when the swell arrives, heavy swell, the ship started maybe moving, and the wet cargo acting like a liquid moved to one side, and then it was, the stability was disturbed, and she was capsized with loss of several lives, ship, and cargo. Testing by the MMD revealed that granular sulfur in pellet form 2 to 3 mm in diameter had an angle of repose of 25 degrees. So it makes an angle with the horizontal of 25 degrees and behave like grain. The cargo had a storage factor of 0.78 7 meter cube, and if left untrimmed would result in 30 to 50% void space in all holds. Okay. In ship motions, the cargo would initially settle and then shift akin to grain. In view of this, through MS Notice 22/1998, the government has prohibited the loading of granular sulfur on general cargo ships, and only bulk carriers having a document of authorization and loaded with cargo in accordance with the Grain Code are permitted to call at Indian ports. Okay, so there is a document of authorization as per the MS Notice, because this normally document of authorization is for grain cargo, but here, as per MS Notice, we'll be using it for sulfur also, because its cargo is behaving as grain. So it has the stability criteria has to be tested and requirements met as per the document of authorization requirement. Then the next cargo is cotton. So we know first thing that cotton is a very light cargo. So transporting it will be like, you might not get that much weight, so the freight would be calculated as per your volume, one thing, and then also otherwise also it's a solution for the freight, but the ship will be quite light, so you'll have to take ballast also. That will also be, ballast is always one third of the cargo capacity, so the ship will not be having full dead weight. And of course it has a great risk of fire. Then if it is carried in bales with uh, gunny and bound by steel, wire or nylon bands, still the risk of fire is quite a lot. It can catch fire very, very easily. So, what to do? Even cotton produces heat itself also if there is little wet. So, it has to be totally dry and warm, and can be subject to spontaneous combustion by friction between bales, or if the bales have been stained by oil or grease. So it's white cargo, so staining is also quite possible, and even with the burlap or whatever bale covers. And friction and all can also cause fire while too much moving. So to avoid all these things, especially when loading, what we must do first, the hole should be properly cleaned, dry, well aired, and absolutely free of oil or grease. Cotton must not be stored in freshly painted holes, as heat produced is likely to cause ignition on paint vapors. Okay. Firefighting equipment must be tested and ready for immediate use, and all the precautions observed. So, all firefighting equipment should be tested and ready. If using steam to fight a fire, the decks should not be cooled, as this causes the steam to condense, creating a vacuum inside the hole, which draws air into the hole, thus assisting the spread of the fire instead of containing it. So, like we were discussing, so if there is a fire, sometimes instead of water, you can, if you have extra, you can put steam also. And but you can use one thing, either cooling down spraying or steam. If you use both, then there can be a vacuum inside the hole which draws air in the hole, and this the S is air, it has oxygen and it can increase the fire. So the cotton is loaded in bales, so it should be clean and well absolutely dry, obviously, otherwise it will contaminate. free from any rust, stains, grease, oil. If it is in a confined space, it will heat and deteriorate. Wet and dry bales should not be stored together. Wetness may not be readily apparent as the outside of the bales may get dried quickly. So there are so many wet bales if they are stored in a confined space. Obviously, because of the small space, the heat will increase. Because cotton, whatever form it is, it's from the live plant and it still has some prana energy or life. It deteriorates over a period of time if it is left without any use. So better use it and make anybody using it or keep it safe, whoever can on the ship. Loosely packed bales or those with broken bands or torn wrapping should be rejected as these permit air circulation and catch fire easily. So you have to inspect the bales very carefully if they are any damage or bringing any learned material. So make sure that everything is properly lashed, wrapped, and there are no broken bands, no broken bags. Otherwise, reject them because if they're open and cargo is falling out and there is a small spark or something, cargo is damaged due to water or spark or whatever, and it's difficult to get everybody together. And so let's read the next point where second hand has this Haitian wrapping is used. Some countries may insist on fumigation of the bales. So depending on what type of lashing government wants, where so new material must be used for wrapping and for replacing parts of wrapping cut off for sampling or grading of the cargo. Then the next is port marks should not be obliterated and the cargo should be well segregated to prevent overcarriage or delay in discharge. So there's a proper marking on each bale from where it is loaded, and how much quantity, everything. So whatever marking is there, it should be so much that it is not deteriorating, especially during loading. And so the new material must be used for wrapping and for replacing parts of wrapping cutoff or sampling or grading of the cargo. Then port marks should not be obliterated and the cargo should be well segregated to prevent overcarriage or delay in the discharge. So you make sure that all marks are properly there on the cargo. All precautions, crew is trained and aware of everything. Dunnage used should be clean, dry, and free from oil grease, obviously. So try to protect from the oil and things as much as possible. Then the latest in IMDG code also there is a cargo called coal, which is loaded on tankers, bulk, and also or other types of bulk carriers, general cargo. So there is a MS notice for around 12th or something, and this notice and one more chapter from Code of Safe Practice for Bulk Carriers and the M notices. So this is आया है तुम्हारे इंटरनल में एंड इसी के बेस पे कुछ मार्क्स बनेंगे और कुछ एक्स्ट्रा. Okay, so IMDG Code of Safe for Practice for Bulk Cargos M notices. Then so let's see. IMDG we already studied with so many A's and slides. Then there are M notices, MS notices. You all know. We will be studying one by one. So if there's a fire in a cargo hold, what will we use? So coal is, you should understand what is coal. It is generated from millions and billions of years. The afternoon lunch, what you using. Sometimes we use for making food and all these things for coal. So there are different types of coal depending on how much water content they have and how much is their calorific value, how much they can catch fire easily. What is the origin? Is it Australian coal, which is very expensive, or it is Indonesian coal, which is not that expensive. So whenever coal is shipped from any place, the history of previous shipments must be known so as to be aware of the hazards of that particular type of coal. Coal may have all or some of the following hazards. So then is first is spontaneous. These are the four main hazards of coal. First is obviously fire for all the cargoes wherever it is. Coal is very liable to spontaneous coal is very liable to spontaneous heating, like it can burn itself. Then freshly mixed coal absorbs oxygen, forming peroxides which break into carbon monoxide. So it emits carbon monoxide, CO2, and sometimes methane also. And obviously it's an exothermic reaction, so it creates heat, and of that heat can further oxidize and more heat, and also there can be fire. So there has to be proper ventilation has to be closed or monitored. If there's only CO, then there has to be proper ventilation. So carbon monoxide has a large flammable range, and between 12 to 75 still lies, that's a I think biggest uh, flammable range, and besides it's also highly toxic. If the head is not dissipated, spontaneous combustion can occur. Oxidation depends on the surface area available for absorption of oxygen. Oxidation depends on the surface area available for absorption of oxygen. Hence, breakage of coal into smaller pieces while it is being loaded is to be prevented. If considerable breakage occurs, the small pieces will accumulate in the center of the hole while the large pieces will roll out to the sides. This aggravates the situation as the large coal gives way for the air to flow to the smaller coal, where spontaneous combustion is most likely. Okay, so you have to make sure you inspect all the cargo nicely, whatever is there, damaged or non-damaged. Then, as I told you, there is methane also. So methane is the natural marsh gas, and can also flammable. It can cause fire, especially when some new person is using. So because methane is lighter than air, so it will be above in the hold, and also if the spark is also up, so chances of fire are very much increased with the presence of ethane, and it can go into the other side tanks, coffer dams, storerooms, everywhere. And you have to make sure you can start ventilation whenever the company or people says nowadays there's a proper cell ensure for the cargo and test it before man entry. So obviously we test all the four gases before man entry: carbon, hydrocarbon, CO2, H2S, and oxygen. And if there is any gas is present, then take precautions to ventilate or whatever, clean, and then check again. Then there are different types of coal as we discussed. One is pond coal, where it is left over from a long time in maybe mining or somewhere, and fresh water is being sprinkled. So later reclaimed for shipment Uh, Now it is reclaimed for shipment. And there's a very high moisture content during this and very high sulfur content also. This type of coal gives rise to a high temperature from self-heating and in the presence of moisture and sulfur leads to the release of sulfuric acid, resulting in corrosion of ship's holds. The ship should carry instruments for measuring pH value of bilges and must be done regularly. And what is liquefaction? Obviously the solid becomes liquid and starts flowing like a liquid. But the process is because of the moisture content in the yards or on the way while loading from the barges or whatever, and how they are issued with different instruments. Now, liquefaction is the process whereby moisture in the cargo migrates to the surface due to compaction and vibration, resulting in the development of a flow state. This is particular in the case of coal slurry, coal duff, and mud coal. The surface of the cargo leaves like a liquid, and a transverse shift of cargo results in reduced ship stability, which can be extremely dangerous. So you can see because of liquefaction, many vessels sank. The last one also was because of navigation hazard. So what type of ventilation will do? Surface ventilation. And for methane gas, if it is from my system, I will pay and get all the safety done. So the safety very important to carry away any methane gas, and nobody should enter there. There's many accidents regarding enclosed space entry, which we have been keep telling, and recently it's quite more. So make sure that there's no discrepancy. To dissipate any heat uh, formed by oxidation of the coal, there is must be thorough and true ventilation from down to up, and there should be no time for that. And it is recommended that for the first 5 days after loading, all ventilators should be utilized. All the ventilators in the lower hold to be plugged and opened only for 6 hours every 2 days. So whatever cargo is there or whatever solid, dust, liquid, corrosive cargo, we have to go in the place and start trying these practicals. So now it is showing practical also, and otherwise also you have practicals. Twin deck and lower hold ventilators should be independent, obviously. Should have independent routine. Then before discharge, careful ventilation should be independent. Before discharge, careful ventilation should be directed towards removing the gases both from between deck and lower hold. Then there is a sudden influx of air into the coal compartments before discharge may have disastrous results. What is the angle? The angle here it is of influx compartments before discharge may have discussed results. So uh, in fine weather, hatches may be opened to facilitate surface ventilation. Attention to be paid to the storerooms, tanks, and other spaces where methane or carbon temperature pipes and leading down to the bottom of the cargo and provided particularly below the hatchways. So these are the things, because as we told last time, the temperature, cold temperature is increasing. Check the temperature, and if required, do the boundary cooling more than, I think, 50 degrees centigrades. Then you have to keep monitoring in between. Sometimes we do during the flow, cargo is full, and we have to do the hatch cleaning mostly before after departure. So you have to prepare in advance whatever leave and all we will do. But we have to take care of the safety. The decks are to be kept cool. So this was a special requirement, because normal decks are at normal temperature. But if you want full view or full instrument, then we have to give a list. The decks are to be kept in triple areas by rigging awning. Cover with drainage and running deck water. Template pipes are to be closed during and the temperature pipes are to be closed and to prevent any entry of air into the cargo. And there is spontaneous heating is also a big hazard, which can increase if any girl complains or something. Then at temperatures around 55 degrees, the showing rising tendency, the existence of the fire should be strongly suspended. So I told you last time the limit of this thing is 55 degrees, above which they consider fire. And this is everywhere. The cargo spaces should be shut down and sealed against entry of air. Okay. So fire. There's a new course which we will already study in MFA, and let's continue. So the fire is, what is a fire? A sufficient number of safety lamps are to be designed. Electrical cables and compass situated in cargo spaces should be free from defects. So, if there is evidence of cargo burning, the space should be enclosed and ventilation stopped and sealed against to her. So, these are the different hazards you can keep in mind regarding coal. Now the main thing is shifting of the cargo. So this we will continue from tomorrow. Any questions? Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavasishyate Om